Welcome to the L36 Podcast, where the global exploration of cultural insights and the stories of people making a difference, big and small, become the shift in perspective that fuels our personal growth. I'm your host, Steven Pearce, founder of L36, and today we're thrilled to welcome Gretchen Bleiler, world-renowned Olympic medalist snowboarder, as we explore the path to Olympic-level competition and the transformative journey that shaped her success. Joining us are Allison Daly, writer, grief counselor, and executive director of Pathfinders, a nonprofit supporting individuals through loss and healing. Kristen Urbanis, a transformative coach specializing in psychology, somatic healing, and leadership, helping people cultivate resilience and self-awareness. Nat Sherritt, a spiritual educator and counselor dedicated to helping individuals awaken to their highest potential through wisdom and inner transformation. And our friends at L36, Ralph and Cindy, bringing their own unique insights to today's discussion. Together, we'll dive into what it takes, not just physically, but mentally, emotionally, and spiritually, to reach the highest levels of performance and transformation. Let's get started. Today we have a whole host of beautiful people here with us that are going to help, and we're going to have a beautiful conversation. But we have a special guest, which is Gretchen Bleiler. And I'm just going to read my little blurb about her. But by the way, she shared something with me, and you think you know somebody, and you're like, oh, I've heard that, she was in the Olympics. That's great. And then I said, can you just tell me what I should share with people, what I could share with people? And then I read this thing, and I was like, oh my God. But anyway, let me read this. So Gretchen Bleiler is a two-time Olympic snowboarder and Olympic silver medalist, four-time X Games champion, ESPY award winner, the first athlete, male or female, to design her own signature collection with Oakley, and the first action sports female to appear on the cover of ESPN, the magazine. She's been featured in everything from primetime talk shows like Conan O'Brien and Jay Leno to the L36 Podcast, to national commercials with brands like AT&T and Dunkin' Donuts, to hundreds of publications worldwide that's been inducted into multiple Hall of Fame. Wow. Yeah. I didn't know that about you. And here's I'm just this innocent guy saying, hey, will you this podcast and talk a little bit?
Well, Steven, you have your own documentary, so and you're launching your own platform. So
that's true.
Okay.
No, but seriously, thank you. And I would say thanks for kind of being the center of attention for all of us, because I do think that takes some gusto, if that's the right word. But if we could just start for just a minute, because I've been passionate about more along the lines of extreme sports. Mine was wakeboarding. It's nothing compared to snowboarding as far as heights and danger and peril, but I became fascinated by sport at a very young age, and it took me places that gave me things that I would not have expected. But what I would love to start with is, if we can just start with, why was it snowboarding for you? Or where did that come from?
Yeah, it didn't start with snowboarding. It started with, I had a dream since I was a little girl. I watched the Calgary Winter Olympics on TV in 1988, so I was 7 years old. And I watched those Olympics, and at that time, I decided I wanted to become an Olympian. And at the time, I was from Dayton, Ohio. I was a part of a very athletic family. We did lots of sports. We did soccer and swim team and diving team. And really, my mom had us involved in sports all the time. I think it was her way of sort of getting us out of the house. Growing up with three brothers, I was a tomboy. I was trying to keep up with my older brothers all the time. And I was naturally very competitive, a very competitive person. And so when I watched the Olympics, it was just like a resonance. I mean, I was 7, but it was this resonance of like, I want to be that. And it wasn't even a specific sport. It was just, I want to be an Olympian. I want to be the best. I saw that those were human beings who had like stretched themselves. They were strong, they were resilient, they had like fallen and gotten back up. And there was something about becoming an Olympian that just called to me. And that was the beginning for me. It was about the Olympics. And because I was from Ohio, at first it was like traditional sports. So whatever I was a part of, I did it to the best of my ability. So it always like fueled me and it inspired me. And I didn't come across snowboarding until I was 10 years old. My family moved from Ohio to Aspen, Colorado. And of course, my entire world changed at that time. But this dream didn't change. It just shifted from traditional sports to now I was climbing mountains and ice skating and up on the mountain. And one of these days, I went to a school where we had a half day off on Wednesday afternoons to go up on the mountain and do something, whether it was skiing, snowshoeing. It was sort of part of our education. And one of those afternoons, I learned to snowboard. And at the time, snowboarding, it was the furthest thing from being an Olympic sport. It wasn't allowed on most mountain resorts. I loved it because my brothers were snowboarders, and it was this sort of rebellious thing, sort of anti-establishment thing. And I love that. And, for me, just like everybody, snowboarding, when you first do it, it's hard. You fall a lot, but I love the challenge of it. And I just fell in love with snowboarding. And so here I had this awesome new sort of like culture that I wanted to be a part of that was more about style and community and camaraderie. And then I had this dream of becoming an Olympian, and they weren't connected at the time. So they eventually did, though. 1998, snowboarding was inducted to the Winter Olympics for the very first time. And, it was very controversial, actually, because most snowboarders, the Olympic movement was sort of anti-snowboarding. It was, snowboarding was about going against the status quo, and the Olympics were sort of that. And so most snowboarders at the time rebelled against snowboarding being in the Olympics. And at the exact same time, the Olympic movement didn't really respect snowboarding as like really being a real sport, and didn't respect snowboarders as real athletes. And so on both sides, it was like not a fit at first. But for me, it was 100% a fit. And I didn't really care one way or the other. I just wanted to, I had always wanted to become an Olympian. And now the fact that this sport that I love was a part of that movement, I was all about it. And that was the first time I knew that I wanted to go to the Olympics for snowboarding.
Amazing. But so 7 years old, right? You knew you wanted to be an Olympian. But as you go into something like snowboarding, I mean, I think what I'm always fascinated about is, okay, everybody, I want to be an Olympian. I want to be a snowboarder. Can you take us through like, what's like the internal dialogue for that? Because the external, it's like, I think everybody can say that, but not everybody becomes an Olympian or professional snowboarder. Like there's in my mind, there has to be a different dialogue that takes you way beyond what other people do with something like that. But what is that for you?
Well, it's a really good question. I am a very focused, passionate, intense person. So when I first started snowboarding, I mean, I have so many friends who kind of tell the story of like, yeah, I used to snowboard with Gretchen, and we would go out on the weekends and we would have fun. And then like the next year she was competing and she was winning contests. And everyone kind of describes that point of when I was just like riding casually to like all of a sudden now it's a different level. And I think probably all of us on this call today can relate to that experience of like when you are dedicated to something. For me, I was always thinking about it. I was always thinking about, my brothers. I knew what tricks they were doing on the mountain and where they were doing them on the mountain. And I always rode on my own because not everybody wanted to ride as much as I wanted to ride. So I ended up riding alone. And I would like go out onto the mountain on a mission. Like today, I'm going to work on frontside 180s off that little roller on Naked Lady. Like I was in training at 14 years old and nobody knew it but me. So I was really, and what was fueling me is I wanted to learn. I wanted to grow. I wanted to become a great snowboarder. And there was so much opportunity for that because at the time I was just learning. So I wanted to go out on the mountain every single day that I could. And where my friends would like go to the movies and hang out and do regular teenage things, I was like thinking about hiking up the mountain and trying to teach myself how to ride the half pipe because I was too intimidated to go into the half pipe as a 14-year-old girl. So it was just me, I was just being authentic to my heart and what I cared about and what I wanted to learn. And that's sort of the mindset.
So it's kind of like an obsession. Does it feel like an obsession? Like, because you're 14, right? I mean, it's not like we're thinking that. I get interested by this because I think most people, in knowing what like the adventure of your life is, it's hard to know at 14 years old. I wish I would have known at 14. I knew like something similar. I had a sport that I loved, and that's all that I could think about. That's it. And that's the only way that I know that I got good at something was because for me, it was an obsession.
Yeah. And I guess you could call it an obsession. That's not the word that I would use. Because, well, it's just not the word that I would use. But when you're thinking about something, and it really wasn't. It wasn't something I was obsessing around. It was something that I loved. It was a challenge in my life. I had things that I wanted to learn. There were steps that I knew I could take to learn them. So there was a progressive path and there was so much opportunity to keep going. Like it was never ending. But it wasn't something that I was like ruminating in my head around all the time. It wasn't something that was bringing me stress or felt heavy or even was, to me, it was always a healthy inspiration and a healthy, like just being so connected to something that was also, 14 years old, you're going to school. At 14 years old, I was part of a private school. There were probably 15 people in my grade. I played soccer. I was probably involved in other sports too, but like snowboarding was something out of the like everyday norm. Snowboarding was like a spark, an inspiration, like something bigger that held my attention more than like my everyday activities.
Okay. Gretchen, would you consider this a hyper focus on mastery?
Yeah, I like that better than obsession.
Yes, because I get it. It's like an intense ability to sequentially master your craft. And that is different than an obsession.
Yeah, that feels more resonant to me. And that's like a mindset too, because when I stopped competing, when I stopped having those goals on my snowboard, I still had that mindset, that like the mastery mindset. So I love that description.
I'm wondering, Gretchen, that
the obstacles that when you started doing what you were doing and you couldn't do it, or you had a problem with that particular skill, and how were you overcoming those things while keeping because I kind of feel that you were like driven to do this, like in the back of your mind, well, when I get a chance, I'm going to go and try to do this little trick or that little trick. But what happened when those things were hard?
Yeah. Well, I started competing I think I started competing around 15 years old. And from the very beginning, when I first started competing, all the way up until, so that would have been like 19, I don't know when I was 15. I'm not going to do that math. But basically, until 2003, when I was probably 20 years old, so maybe a 5-year span, I was not a natural competitor. It was not something that came easy. It was not something that I just did and, all of a sudden I know how to compete and I'm winning. I was the type of athlete that I put so much pressure on myself. I put huge expectations on myself. And so when it came to actually competing in the beginning, well, in those first 5 years, when it came for me to actually drop into my competition run, I would crack under the pressure and the weight that I put on myself. And I continued to crack and crack and crack. And I finally got to this place where I was like, I need to figure this out. This is not serving me. I'm not enjoying myself. I'm not competing up to my potential. I couldn't figure out what was going on. And I remember my mom suggested that I talk to a friend of hers who was and still is, a mountaineer and an alpinist. He climbs the tallest peaks around the world, and most specifically in the Himalayas. And I remember going to him and talking to him, and he kind of just gave me the advice of like, you just got to keep at it. You got to keep competing. You got to keep gaining experience. And so I even like reached out and was getting advice from people, and I continued to struggle and to fall and get really down on myself and question if this was something that was for me, if this was really the avenue I should continue to pursue, because I was not having success doing what I was doing. And that was really frustrating. I finally sort of cracked the code. Even though I wasn't having a ton of success with my results in competition, I was still snowboarding well enough to get invited onto the U.S. snowboard team right out of high school. And in 2001, I competed with the U.S. snowboard team for my first U.S. Olympic qualifiers. And that season, there were 5 Olympic qualifiers, and that was the closest I had ever come to, and I'm kind of like jumping forward, right? From when I was 15 years old until now I'm 20. I'm working hard with this like mastery, obsessive mindset. I'm working hard. I'm pushing myself. I'm learning new tricks. I'm riding with riders who are better than me. I'm learning from them. I'm not doing well in competition, but I'm progressing. I'm learning. And in 2001, I'm definitely not the best female snowboarder in the country, but I am among the best in the country. And because I was so close to actually experiencing this dream that I had since I was 7 years old, like fear set in, because, here I was actually a professional snowboarder, and I'm on the U.S. snowboard team, and I'm actually competing for the U.S. Olympic team. And it's like right within my sight. And because it's right within my sight, that pressure and those expectations that I had put on myself, even, since I was 15 years old and even younger, that load seemed to like quadruple. And I was so nervous before those qualifiers. I remember like throwing up before dropping into my Olympic qualifying runs, and just being so tight and constricted and wanting it so badly that I couldn't even breathe and I couldn't enjoy myself. And on top of that, because I was not the best US Olympic girl, my friend and teammate suggested that I try this trick that no other girl was doing at the time called the crippler. And it was sort of like within my skill set. I was doing straight over backflips on my snowboard at the bottom of my run. And he basically came up to me and said, if you turn that trick into a crippler, you'll be able to pull it up earlier on in your run. It'll make your run more technical, and it'll probably raise the whole level of your riding. And that could really be something that like sets you apart, and it could help you get on the team. So besides being so like forceful with this, these qualifiers and wanting it so badly and being so filled with nerves, now I was also trying a new trick for the first time during practice and during the qualifiers. And I was throwing it and I was hurting myself and I was giving myself black eyes. It was horrible. Like the situation was not enjoyable at all. Long story short, I'm taking a beating and forcing it and sort of having so focused on the Olympics and not present to what I'm doing or why I'm doing it, because I've just so sucked into this dream, like being consumed by like the end result versus actually enjoying what I'm doing. I wasn't able to get to that place during those Olympic qualifiers. And even though things were that bad, I ended up tying with my best friend for the last Olympic spot. And yeah, and we didn't just tie, it came down to a triple tiebreaker, of course. And, at the end of the day, on the final Olympic qualifier, it was announced that she would be going to the Olympics and I would not be. And I went home that night, and while everyone was off kind of celebrating that they're headed to the Olympics, and those were good Olympics too. They went to the 2002 Olympics in Salt Lake City, so they were in the US. But I went home and I just kind of reflected on that Olympic qualifying experience. And I basically, the first feeling that I felt was relief that it was all over. And then after feeling relief that it was all over, I kind of took a step back and thought about that and was a little disturbed that the first feeling that I thought was relief that it was over, because since I was 7 years old, I wanted to become an Olympian. And here I was like glad that it was over. And I realized in that moment, that night, that I had let this dream of becoming an Olympian be more important than like my everyday joy of being a professional snowboarder. And with that realization, I decided that if every single day I got to enjoy being a professional snowboarder that was working towards becoming an Olympian, even if I never became an Olympian, that would be enough. And that was a shift in consciousness that totally changed everything with regard to how I competed and how I showed up every single day in my career.
How did that feel, like the internal shift?
Mm-hmm.
Can you describe that? How you moved from one to the other?
Yeah, I mean, how I felt when I was competing, I was, I think I was in an unconscious belief that I wouldn't be anything if I didn't become that Olympian, which is why I was coming at it from such like fear and force, like so much was on the line, like so much more than just becoming an Olympian was on the line. And that shift into like, I will be enough and it will be enough if every single day I just get to enjoy this journey of following the call of my heart and being a professional snowboarder. Like, that's enough. That is light. That is joyful. That brings me back into the present moment. And from there, there is so much creativity available from that space. And actually, that following season, that trick that I had been trying the season before, all of a sudden, I was now landing that new trick because I was relaxed and I was enjoying myself and I was present. And because of that, I was able to do this trick because it was in my capacity all along. But with the mentality that I had before, the being tight and constricted, I didn't really have a chance. But now in this new state, it came. Of course it came with work, and I was still out on the mountain and I was still training and working with my coaches, but it came. And as I started landing that new trick, the whole level of my snowboarding rose and I was enjoying myself, and I started winning the first 2 contests of that season. And then I went into the next contest, which was the X Games, which was the biggest event every single season. And I had a very pivotal moment happen there. I feel like when we start to learn how to make that shift, like I made the shift, and then I started having success in that new state, in that state of being present and relaxed and enjoying myself. Those first 2 contests of the season came pretty easily, winning. But then came the X Games, and now there's pressure. Now there's expectations. Now there's a lot more on the line. So it was sort of like a test. Are you going to go back to the old way? Or are you going to, take this leap of faith back into this new way of being? And I had that moment, and I can talk about that as well. But I feel like on this path, we have these tests that kind of come up.
Sure. Yeah, Gretchen, to me, that really speaks to the power of surrender. And when we want something so badly and we work for it and we do everything in our power, everything in our control, and then at some point, it seems like there's this, universal experience of having to let go. And, surrender and acceptance of what we can control, of what we can't control. And then in that space of surrender, which feels often like an ego death, then
it's so hard to get there. I struggle with that to this day, I would say. I get it. I hear what you're saying, but my gosh, that little piece that just holds you to the end result, it's, it is so challenging. And yet when I do what you're talking about, the world just feels so different. It's so good.
Magic can happen.
Yeah.
Actually leave a chink in the armor for the magic to come through.
Yeah.
I think that the thing that to me is really interesting is this relationship to fear. And I think that Kristen spoke to the solution, which is that surrender. I think that a lot of what Gretchen's story shows of that in the way she surrendered was to enjoy. She has to enjoy something and relax as a form of surrender. And it's an interesting topic to me too, because it has analogies in my life of learning to surf larger waves. I'm not a surfer by trade, but it's been a very passionate hobby. That's my background. And one of the things when you're dealing with bigger waves for me is 15, 20 foot faces, it's not surfing the wave, it's having the wave land on you, right? Like you're snowboarding in a way, except for there's always an avalanche. You do. And then when it takes you down, like when it lands on your head, you literally don't have control of your body. You're flailing around. You're driven so deep it's dark and violent. And you're supposed to relax. Because if you tense up, if you're afraid, which it's absolutely frightening, but if you're afraid, you use more air, and then like there's bad things happen if you run out of air.
Yes, that is correct.
And you're underwater. So it really brings it viscerally, this relationship to fear that Gretchen's talking about here in a way. When she was talking about the pressure and the fear, and there's all this need for result and control, having that, like I've heard us say, like when the big waves come, you're supposed to like laugh. You laugh at it. You laugh, you enjoy it, and I've done trainings and things like that with some of the actual big wave surfers that surf much bigger waves. And they go into an like you choose ahead of time your happy place, your imagination. So while you're getting thrashed, you're in a different place. I find that when that diaphragm starts pushing to breathe, and you start feeling that thing inside, it's hard to maintain the relaxation. But to me, that's a lot of what Gretchen was talking about, what Kristen was talking about, what you were talking about in that surrendering, that letting go, that relaxing. In that situation, in the big weight situation, it can be life or death. And so you have to relax. And in her situation, the relaxation, in a way, the enjoyment, to me, is what led the shift to allow her to actually get to where she wanted to go. And I think that's illustrated by that story. That's what it brought up for me in her story.
Go ahead. I was just thinking about how one of the beautiful things, and we've had conversations about this, is also how you have allowed fear, you worked with the fear. In other words, it's not like that day that you had the shift, you didn't have fear anymore.
Right.
You learned to use the fear to help you.
Well, and that's like such a young age to learn to make such a big shift, when there's so much pressure. And I imagine Gretchen, like internal pressure, of course, external pressure of, the team and family, and, all the other types of pressure to just make that internal shift of, if what I'm hearing is like, if it's not fun, then if I'm not enjoying it, then why am I doing it? Am I doing it? Is that the first time that you learned how to make that inner shift?
Yeah, I mean, that moment after the Olympic qualifiers, I didn't know, I didn't have conscious awareness around what I had done, like making the shift out of fear into more of the truth of who I was, more of, that I was enough, that my joy was enough to have a goal of actually enjoying myself every single day, because I've always been so driven. For someone like me, bringing in joy, it's funny that I would have to, as a professional snowboarder, have to remind myself, oh, right, enjoy yourself. But I've had to, like, that has been something that has had to be an intention of mine. Because that oftentimes, when I get sucked into unconscious patterns and behavior, it's because I haven't remembered, oh yeah, I get to enjoy this. And I think that's an important message for everybody, because it doesn't matter what our lives look like or don't look like, or what job we do have or we don't have. Most people would think if you're a professional snowboarder, you're enjoying yourself. But I am here to say that I was a professional snowboarder and I had to remind myself to enjoy myself. I think that's an important message, that joy is a choice. It's a mindset.
Ran a couple of marathons, not a big runner, but I ran a couple of them. And my sister lived in India for a while. And one of my strategies when I got tired or my legs hurt, I imagined her in a rickshaw next to me. And I would say, so you just hold this pain for me for a minute. And it made me laugh for one. So it's bringing joy, but it also was giving me a strategy that kind of worked.
Yeah.
Pain wasn't as strong, but it was that going to laughter. Laughter's always been that piece of bringing me back to the present.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so go ahead. I think that there's something really important in what Gretchen was saying that doesn't just relate to snowboarding, and that is, it is a state of mind and it is a practice, because you can say whatever it is, like it could be, if I was rich, I'd be happy. Find out that rich people aren't happy, and you're like, what? Why could you not be happy? You can do whatever you want. Oh, you live in paradise. Why aren't you happy? It's like, well, because it doesn't, it has a lot less, not that the outer circumstances doesn't affect our happiness, but it has a lot less to do with our happiness than our own attitude. And our attitude is determined by what we're looking at and our altitude of how we're seeing things. What Gretchen was talking about, and just choosing this intention of enjoyment and everything, she had a touchstone and an intention, a purpose that was more than the outer purpose. So the outer purpose may have been to get to her Olympic dream, right? That was the dream. But the inner purpose is something that you can do all along the way, and you can do anytime. And even if you fail, and even if your life goes a different direction, it's like you can choose to enjoy something. Like, I'm sure Gretchen can choose to enjoy something other than snowboarding, right? Like, it's like you can choose that intention in your life. And I think that that's something in all the spiritual work I've done and continue to do with clients and things like that and teaching, is that having that intention is super key. And Gretchen seemed to stumble upon that realization in her own awakening of awareness of herself. But there's a lot of people that learn that through people like us talking about it, or each one of us sharing about that. And I think that's a really key aspect of having a happy life, enjoying your life, and enjoying it on your way to wherever you're going.
That's it right there. Enjoying it on your way to wherever you're going, and not have where you're going be the end all be all. And that was my shift. Taking where I was going to be my end all be all and bringing it back to, how do I want to feel right here and right now? And this goes back to your question, Kristen, around, was that the first time I learned how to shift? Yeah, it was actually, I in that moment decided I'm going to step into becoming, like I always say, I had to learn how to become an Olympian before I became an Olympian. And that was one of the steps in doing it, was claiming my joy through the everyday process. That was how I wanted to be an Olympian, was it through joy. I didn't want to go to the Olympics and have it be so horrible that I was throwing up before my run. I didn't want to do it that way. And you can do it that way. Some people do. But because of that experience, I decided how I was going to be an Olympian was equally important. I actually wanted to enjoy it.
Yeah, it's funny because I know I mentioned that I was wakeboarding, so I have my own board sport now, as is. Gretchen has hers.
Yes, we do.
Mine was wakeboarding, and I used the word obsession earlier in questioning this because I didn't know how else to describe it at 12 years old. When I got a wakeboard, I would put it in my bed and I would tuck it in, and I would make sure that I was touching it when I went to sleep, because I had to bond with this board in order for me and the board to be as one, so we could go kill it, And to this day, I don't know that I've ever told anybody this, but you have two fingers, right? And they're kind of on a board. So when I go to open the stairs, right, there's a drop off, and a backside 360. And I'm 43 years old, still doing this. And I've been doing that since I was 12. So I still wakeboard. I still use this board because that was like this, the board and the writing itself was this form of joy for me. It was this, but it was a soul expression for me. This was freedom for me. And even I would surf and I tried to snowboard some, but I was like, my God, that's a heavy landing. But all of them were just these beautiful forms of expression, truly being a soul out there. Like, it was the closest thing to flying that I wanted to be a part of. And that was the reason that I actually couldn't compete. Because every time you would put me in a competitive environment to do it, the soul was gone. And I didn't want anything to do with it. I had to, you train, you do your practice, you do your, or for wakeboarding, you have your tricks, just like in snowboarding, you have your tricks that you try over and over and over. And there was just no soul there. And so I never wanted to be part of it.
What was your best trick, Steven?
My best trick, in those days you could get to like a whirly bird, and that was pretty good. That was like
what's a whirly bird?
It's like a backflip, and then you throw the rope over your head, and you do a 360, and then you land. That one was, I like that one.
Your whirly bird is like my crippler. We were doing similar tricks, Steven, you and me.
And I just want to add that he made it look effortless. It was like he could stand on the board while the boat was idling. It was amazing.
I weighed 80 pounds in this.
That's incredible. I mean, I wakeboard, I've wake surfed, and I could never do that. So props, big props to you, Steven.
I do love that point about being in joy with something. I mean, because for me, it's what we're doing right now is joy for me, is sharing this wisdom that you guys have. I love film, and it's like, this is something else that I find deep joy in being a part of. So it's so critical. So critical.
I'll just say a little something about the crippler is that as you get older and you're doing these sports, it takes a lot less to have a crippler today. Turn on a wave. Point out. Really a crippler, and there was air going on.
Did you surrender in that moment?
I didn't surrender and stuff. I'm learning the importance of stretching. I'm so excited that I just go, oh, I'm gonna go surf without stretching. I do, like, there's been this talk about obsession, right? And one of the things, while in the early part where we were talking about obsession, that I just noted was the word inspiration. Inspiration is an interesting word if you go back, because it's about the influence of God and breathing in and animating through breath. And it can like go back to stories of God animating, humans by breathing in, and inspiration is breathing in. And, to me, like, I can take those ideas of the inspirations, like you're breathing into this dream, but also it's like you're breathing in and out this wakeboarding or whatever your, passion is, your obsession. But it's like, to me, like, obsessions we can have, I think they can be positive, but also there can be a stigma of the word also, of obsession. But like the inspiration, to me, it's like you're so inspired that like it becomes part of your breathing in and breathing out. And I think it just made a note for me. I love talking about breath because there's so much on so many levels about breath. And so to me, that's a great word that I would use, that Gretchen used, in terms of talking about these things that we love and that bring us so much learning and reflection about life. Because look, we all have different things that we love, but they all teach us the same things in a way. You can learn the same thing on a wave as you can, doing, saying,
I really resonated with what you shared, Stephen, of, these adventure sports as awakening freedom. That feeling of like freedom. And I've recently taken up mountain biking. For me, it's been like a life, I've always felt this adventure. I think we can feel that call or like a new vision at any time in our lives. And for me, the mountain biking has been, first of all, it's like it's a whole body experience. but it's like the opportunity to experience freedom at a different level. And I wonder if sometimes these adventure sports that we take on, because they're whole body and they require like 100% focus on all levels, if they just provide this opportunity for transcending in a way.
That's beautiful. That's beautiful. It's an opportunity for transcendence.
And
I mean, I think that's that's what it feels like when I'm there. But I mean, it's every, it's the whole thing combined, right? I mean, you're in nature. All of the sports, you're out in nature. I mean, you're able to connect that way. And sunset, sunrise, beautiful skies, you name it. You get to experience that. And then you're right. I mean, I think you are totally present in that moment, doing whatever activity it is that you're doing, if you're in love with it.
Yeah,
Recipe for that.
I want to speak to like what you guys are speaking to right now, which Steven, you said wakeboarding for you was such a soul experience. Like you couldn't be confined to like training or competing. And that's sort of what I'm sensing from you, Kristen, too. Like when you're on your mountain bike, you're free. You're free in a way that you don't always feel free in your everyday life. And that was the interesting dynamic that I had, is I felt so free in snowboarding, and that's why I was attracted to snowboarding, right? Because it was about authentic self-expression and like pushing boundaries and going outside of like what was normal. But then I combined it with like wanting to become like the best. And that was a weird combination, right? Like Steven, you were saying, like, I just want to be free on my wakeboard. Like, I'm not going to limit my wakeboarding by competing. And so, but I had to learn how to do that. Like, I had to learn how to be free in the conditions that actually triggered my not being free.
But you ended up finding that balance again. Like, I mean, that's the part that I think is beautiful. I think everybody's going to take something to their own level, but I love that you found that balance.
Yeah, that was a journey.
But there's a freedom in that too, because then you can see that you can continue to do that in life.
Right. Get free wherever.
Right.
yeah. I love what you shared about claiming the consciousness of the Olympian. So becoming the Olympian before you became the Olympian. And I feel like this is applicable to everyone. It's like whenever we have a vision, we have a dream, it's like the hero's journey. Or there's a quote, I'm not sure who it's by, it might be Rainier Marie Welk. The future enters into us to transform itself long before it happens. Mm-hmm. And it's, for some people, it's like knowing really at a young age they want to be a mom, or it could be anything, and it can happen at any point throughout our lives. Like, I think it continues to happen. Steven, you knew you wanted to be a doctor, and then you knew you wanted to do film. Yeah. And it's like, we will inevitably encounter probably infinite challenges. Mm-hmm. And then we have the opportunity to learn from and face those challenges and whatever they bring up within us. And I think, Gretchen, this like illustrates the hero's journey, which we all go through probably many iterations of throughout our lives. That this, like, we might push it away. We have our like ego deaths and these, we have to die to who we were to become who we are becoming, to become the person that can receive this experience, this dream. It's such a journey.
It is a journey.
It really reminds me of that Viktor Frankl quote, and I just pulled it up. Everything can be taken from a man but one thing, the last of the human freedoms, to choose one's attitude in any given set of circumstances, to choose one's own way. And he was coming from the experience of being in a concentration camp in World War II. And in the book, Man's Search for Meaning, I believe that was the book.
Yeah.
So that that idea that we're talking about here, I think, translates very much into the realm of spiritual psychology and spirituality and all of these ideas of, yeah, it is the freedom. This is where we get that taste of it, but we can choose it in any given set of circumstances. And that's something that, people like him and others who are examples in those really difficult situations have chosen. And I actually think University of Santa Monica, which a number of us have been through here, there was an outshoot of that. I don't know what it was technically called, maybe the prison, we used to call it the prison project, but
Right, it's still that.
and there was a documentary, I believe, called The Freedom to Choose.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And just to me, that name says it. They were going into prisons where people obviously are not free, and giving them these tools and techniques and opportunities to experience the freedom to choose. And I think that that's something that, I'm seeing us go into in the discussion here is yes, you take it from this place that just automatically brings us to that. And then Gretchen was in doing that activity in a scenario that took her out of the spirit of that enjoyment and had to reestablish that. And I think that that's something as an example that we can take through any situation in our lives as an opportunity to choose, that inner experience of freedom, of whatever that, however we relate to that goodness. And that's just something I wanted to comment, because as we're talking about, I'm like, oh yeah, this is lining up with a lot of that kind of work.
I'm glad you brought that forward, Nat, because I think it maybe for some people could be easy to say, like, you're a professional snowboarder or you're an Olympian, like to create that sense of separation or like different circumstances. And then I think to hear that quote from Viktor Frankl, he just was such an incredible example. His message of, I'll say it again, you could take away everything from a man or a woman, but you can't take away their ability to choose their response. So powerful.
Yeah, and Alice and I literally were in a dynamic. I was in the dynamic. I very recently, in the last 6 weeks, got pulled into, like, once again, this unconscious pattern of putting work, relationships, all these other things in front of taking care of myself, in front of my everyday joy. It happened again, guys. I'm now 33 and I'm still learning it, but now it happens quicker. But it also, it's a reorientation, because I learned it. I learned how to do it in my world of snowboarding and my vehicle of snowboarding and what that world looked like. And now I'm living a very different life in a very different, my world looks different. So I think it's different, but it's not different. It's the same thing. And thank God I have friends like you all to help remind me. And Allison, literally, I called her last weekend and I was overwhelmed with all of my responsibilities and the things that I had to do in my life. And I felt I had so many people to get back to. And she literally said, Gretchen, what would it take to drop everything and take care of yourself right now? And what would it take for you just to get back to the people you feel are waiting for a response from you, and just say, you know what, it's been a really tough week and I'm going to need a little extra time. When she said that, it was like a breaker switch where I woke up and was like, right, here I am. Thank you, Allison. She just turned me back on. Right. I get to take care of myself. I get to choose. I get to get back to people and ask for more time. And before she asked, what do you need to do to take care of yourself? And for me, it was, I want to clean my house and I want to get back to these people I feel like I need to get back to. And then when I made the shift, I still wanted to do the exact same things. But now it was from the perspective, I get to do these things in order to take care of myself. And so nothing changed, but everything changed.
Yeah. Right. I'm in a different age group than y'all. Just turned 67, and this past year I've gone through a knee replacement.
Mm.
And what has happened is it's painful, and I can't really walk and do the things that I used to do. And one of my dreams is to walk the Camino. One of the reasons to do the surgery was to make sure I could do that. And I have been struggling with being able to even conceptualize that dream. And I kind of came to a point a few weeks ago, a month ago, and planned a road trip. And I just got back from driving to Roswell and Colorado and seeing friends and giving myself freedom. I wasn't walking and I wasn't running, but I was going and I was feeding my soul with these long-term friends. But also I'm not going to do what you're probably not going to land that fancy thing that you did a long time ago. It might be different now. And I've been struggling with, who am I now if I'm not the walker, the runner, I'm on the phone and I'm walking around the house. I can't do it. I have to sit down. So, who am I then now? And, well, I'm still me.
Yes, you are.
I don't have what I want to give as my gifts, but it has been a big struggle to have pain when I never really had it before. And hopefully it will go away eventually, but it is here now. And it's in front of me, and embracing it and knowing that, well, it could be. This is what it is. But it doesn't change the internal part. It's hard.
It is hard. But one of the things that I love is that you still found a way to go on that trip and to find, to take that one step, doing something that honored your desire to go and see places and to experience things. And it doesn't change the pain, but you still chose something different for yourself.
Thank you.
Yeah, I just think that's a really important thing to honor.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Amazing.
Yeah, exactly. Truly.
Oh, no.
We're out of time. So Gretchen, I don't know if there's anything else that you wanted to add. I just want to say thank you for sharing your journey. Thank you for everything. And also for bringing along your friends, because they're amazing.
I know, they are. I love this conversation today. Thanks to everybody for having such a beautiful conversation. It brings me so much joy and freedom to be in conversation in this way.
That's it for today's L36 podcast. A huge thanks to Gretchen Bleiler and everyone who joined us for this conversation. If there's one thing to take away from the culture of extreme sports, it's that pushing limits, whether in sports, in life, or in personal growth, isn't just about skill or talent. It's about mindset, resilience, and learning when to let go. Sometimes the biggest breakthroughs come not from forcing it, but from finding the right balance between effort and surrender. Thanks for being here. Keep showing up, keep learning, and we'll see you next time.